On January 5, 1993, Wesley Allan Dodd became the last person in the United States to be executed by hanging, the method he chose for himself. A man whose crimes were as chilling as his calm acceptance of his fate.
In just over an hour from now, Washington State will enforce the ultimate penalty. Wesley Dodd will die for killing 3 small boys.
Dodd was no ordinary criminal. His final 24 hours offer a disturbing glimpse into the mind of a predator who showed no remorse for the pain he caused. But what led him to this point? What kind of person asks to be hanged, believing it's the punishment they truly deserve? Early life. Wesley Allan Dodd was born on July 3, 1961, in a small, unassuming town in Washington State. From the start, his life was anything but stable. As the eldest of 3 siblings, he might have been expected to take on a leadership role within his family, but the household's dysfunction left little room for positive development. His parents, struggling with financial instability and emotional disconnect, provided an inconsistent upbringing. Discipline was erratic, sometimes overly harsh, other times absent altogether. This chaotic environment fostered feelings of neglect in Dodd, leaving him emotionally adrift and disconnected from those closest to him. At school, Dodd's isolation deepened. Teachers described him as quiet and unremarkable, often blending into the background. He wasn't a troublemaker or a star student, just another face in the crowd. His classmates, too, viewed him as withdrawn and peculiar, but not necessarily alarming. This lack of attention, whether positive or negative, reinforced a growing sense of invisibility. Over time, he came to believe that he was unimportant to those around him, further fueling his feelings of alienation. Beneath the surface, Dodd harbored deep resentment and a growing sense of distrust. He struggled to form meaningful connections, leaving him without close friendships or a support system. These early years planted the seeds of a worldview that would later become dangerous, one that saw others as obstacles or tools rather than as equals. Even as a child, there were troubling signs that something was amiss. Dodd exhibited a pattern of deviant behavior that began with minor acts of rebellion. He was frequently caught lying and stealing, actions dismissed at the time as typical childhood mischief. However, his fascination with control and dominance began to emerge in unsettling ways. He became fixated on stories of power, whether through crime novels or sensationalized accounts of violence in the media. This obsession hinted at the darker tendencies that would define his life. As Dodd entered adolescence, his behavior escalated. He began peeping into neighbors' windows and engaging in voyeurism, acts that reflected a growing disregard for boundaries. These invasions of privacy were his way of exerting control, a recurring theme in his life. Each act emboldened him, reinforcing the belief that he could act without facing serious consequences. His family, preoccupied with their own struggles, failed to intervene, while teachers dismissed his withdrawn demeanor as mere shyness. The warning signs, though present, went unnoticed or unaddressed, allowing his behavior to spiral unchecked. Dodd's thoughts became increasingly preoccupied with younger children, a fixation he managed to keep hidden from those around him. While most teenagers were navigating social dynamics and awkward crushes, Dodd retreated into a private world of inappropriate fantasies. These thoughts began to manifest subtly in his behavior, but the lack of consequences only emboldened him further. His inability to form healthy relationships deepened his internal struggles, pushing him further into isolation and resentment. By the time he reached adulthood, Dodd had developed a hardened sense of entitlement. He saw societal rules as mere inconveniences, easily ignored when they clashed with his desires. His minor run-ins with law enforcement for petty theft only reinforced this belief, as he consistently avoided serious punishment. This disregard for authority became a cornerstone of his worldview, enabling him to justify his increasingly deviant actions. Despite his growing detachment from moral and social norms, Dodd maintained an outward appearance of normalcy. He held various jobs and interacted with neighbors, presenting himself as an unremarkable, quiet individual. Beneath this facade, however, was a man consumed by dark desires and meticulously planning how to act on them. His ability to live a double life, masking his true intentions while blending into society, was both calculated and deeply disturbing. During his teenage years, control remained a defining theme in Dodd's life. In fact, Dodd's fixation on control took on a more disturbing form. Whether through manipulative behavior, petty theft, or voyeurism, he sought to dominate those around him. Each act of control fed his need for power, setting the stage for the crimes he would later commit. His early life and adolescence, marked by neglect, isolation, and unchecked deviance, became the foundation for a dangerous trajectory that would ultimately shock the world. Wesley Allan Dodd's descent into criminality began with small but telling acts. As a teenager, he started by stealing small items, seemingly insignificant offenses, but ones that gave him a sense of control. Over time, his actions escalated. He began to harm animals, a disturbing behavior often seen in individuals with violent tendencies. These early acts revealed his lack of empathy and growing disregard for societal norms. Late teens, Dodd had moved on to voyeuristic behavior, spying on neighbors and exposing himself in public spaces. These incidents marked his first strike into the kind of predatory behavior that would define his future crimes. On one occasion, a neighbor reported his voyeuristic activities to his parents, but instead of addressing the issue, they brushed it off as a phase. While Dodd's criminal acts initially seemed all over the place, they began to intensify in both frequency and severity during his early adulthood. Multiple arrests for indecent exposure and other sexual offenses highlighted his inability or unwillingness to curb his behavior. Each time he was caught, he faced minimal consequences, emboldening him to push further. A pivotal moment came when he realized how easily he could manipulate situations to avoid detection, fueling his belief that he was untouchable. This realization marked a dangerous turning point as his fantasies grew darker and his actions more calculated. The failures of the legal system to hold him accountable only reinforced his sense of invincibility. Dodd's shift from deviant behavior to outright predation was not sudden, but deliberate. In the years leading up to his first known murder, he became more methodical, planning his actions with precision. He began frequenting parks and playgrounds, places where he could observe and target vulnerable children. His fantasies, which had once been confined to his mind, became too overwhelming to ignore. A failed attempt to lure a child in a public setting became the catalyst for his next step, plotting abductions in secluded areas where he could exert total control. These events set the stage for the atrocities that followed, solidifying his transition from fantasist to predator. In interviews after his arrest, Dodd revealed glimpses of his thought process. He justified his actions by claiming they were an extension of his desires, urges he insisted he could not suppress. He described his victims not as individuals, but as objects of his need for control and gratification, further demonstrating his detachment from humanity. Though he occasionally expressed regret, it often felt performative, as if calculated to manipulate those around him. Long before his first murder, Dodd deliberately sought out jobs that gave him access to children, including roles as a camp counselor and a delivery driver in family neighborhoods. His movements were deliberate, his intentions clear in hindsight. Those who encountered him during this period often remarked on his quiet demeanor, never suspecting the predatory nature lurking beneath. He kept journals where he detailed fantasies and plans, further showcasing his meticulous approach. Each step, whether a calculated job change or a new method of observation, brought him closer to committing his first murder. Escalation of crimes. Wesley Allan Dodd's first known murder occurred in September 1989. He targeted two young boys, Cole Neer, aged 11, and William Neer, aged 10, in David Douglas Park in Vancouver, Washington. The brothers were playing when Dodd approached them, pretending to need help with directions. He lured them into a secluded area where he tied them up before committing the crime. This disturbing act marked the beginning of his descent into serial murder. His calculated approach demonstrated an alarming mix of patience and predation, setting the tone for his future actions. Following the murder of the Neer brothers, Dodd grew more confident and methodical. Less than a month later, he targeted a 4-year-old boy, Lee Iseli, whom he abducted from a playground. This time, Dodd kept the child alive for several hours, escalating the brutality of his crimes. He documented his actions in a journal, detailing his methods and fantasies, further highlighting his depravity. Unlike his first murders, which were impulsive, this crime showed an increased level of planning. His growing confidence allowed him to refine his tactics, making him even more dangerous. Dodd's downfall came from his increasing overconfidence. He frequented public spaces like parks and playgrounds where his behavior became noticeable. In November 1989, he attempted to abduct another child from a movie theater, but his plan was thwarted when the child's screams alerted others. This crucial mistake gave law enforcement the break they needed to track him down. This incident helped with the investigation into Wesley Allan Dodd's crimes, which was initially hampered by a lack of concrete leads. Law enforcement faced a daunting reality. Initially, his victims were seemingly random, making it difficult to establish a clear pattern. The movie theater incident broke the case wide open. Witnesses provided descriptions of the suspect and his vehicle, prompting officers to track his movements. During their search, authorities uncovered disturbing evidence, written notes detailing his plans and crimes, along with his journal, which contained graphic accounts of his actions. These discoveries not only linked Dodd to the murders, but also revealed the depth of his depravity, inspiring a full-scale effort to capture him. Wesley Allan Dodd was apprehended shortly after his botched abduction attempt. His repeated visits to the same types of locations made it easier for authorities to establish a pattern and anticipate his next move. A vigilant movie theater employee noted his suspicious behavior and quickly alerted authorities. When police arrived, Dodd was still in the vicinity, unaware that his presence had drawn attention. The arrest was swift and uneventful. Dodd did not resist, though his demeanor remained eerily calm. News of Wesley Allan Dodd's crimes came as a surprise to everyone. The sheer brutality of his actions, coupled with his lack of remorse, sparked widespread outrage. Parents were horrified that such a predator had gone unnoticed for so long, leading to calls for stricter child safety measures and harsher punishments for offenders. After his arrest, Wesley Allan Dodd wasted no time confessing to his crimes. His demeanor was unnervingly calm as he detailed his actions with disturbing precision. During police interviews, he described how he selected his victims, lured them, and carried out his horrific acts. Dodd showed no remorse, often speaking about his crimes as if they were routine. In his confession, he even admitted to plans for future crimes, including creating a torture chamber for young children, a revelation that horrified investigators. His journals, discovered during the investigation, contained graphic accounts and plans, reinforcing his premeditated intent. Dodd's confessions were not just admissions of guilt, they were a window into a deeply disturbed mind that sought control and power through unspeakable acts. The sentencing. Wesley Allan Dodd's trial in 1990 was swift and decisive, which goes on to prove the overwhelming evidence and his full confession. His guilt was never in question. Dodd openly admitted to the murders of Cole and William Neer, ages 11 and 10, and 4-year-old Lee Isley. He detailed his crimes with unsettling precision, leaving the courtroom no choice but to focus solely on the punishment he deserved. During the sentencing phase, the courtroom was filled with victims' families, reporters, and members of the public eager to witness justice unfold. Emotional testimony from the families laid bare the devastation Dodd had caused. Parents spoke through tears, recounting the profound void left by their children's deaths. Lee Isley's parents described the heartache of knowing their young son's life was taken so cruelly, and the lasting fear his loss instilled in their family. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, with many attendees visibly shaken by the details shared. Dodd, in contrast, remained disturbingly calm. He offered little in the way of a defense, admitting outright that he deserved to die for his crimes. His lack of remorse only added to the weight of the moment. In a shocking move, Dodd requested the death penalty, specifically asking to be executed by hanging. This rare and symbolic method had not been used in decades, making it a controversial choice. Some viewed it as a just and fitting punishment for his heinous acts, while others saw it as unnecessarily brutal, a reflection of the man himself. The judge ultimately agreed, sentencing Dodd to death by hanging. This decision sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond, as it marked one of the rarest uses of hanging as a modern execution method. The verdict quickly became a focal point in public discourse, sparking debates about the morality and symbolism of such a sentence. The broader impact of Dodd's sentencing reached far beyond the courtroom. Communities nationwide began reevaluating child safety measures, leading to the implementation of stricter policies in schools, playgrounds, and public spaces. Law enforcement and lawmakers worked to improve systems for identifying and tracking potential predators, a legacy directly tied to the horrors of Dodd's actions. For the families of Dodd's victims, the emotional scars remained, a constant reminder of the innocence that was stolen. While the sentencing offered a sense of justice, it could never truly repair the damage done. Still, the image of Dodd facing the gallows stood as a symbol of accountability, a rare moment when the punishment fit the unfathomable scale of the crimes. The last 24 hours. Following his sentencing in 1990, Wesley Allan Dodd spent nearly 3 years on death row at the Washington State Penitentiary. Unlike most death row inmates, Dodd refused to appeal his sentence, insisting that his crimes deserved the harshest punishment. This decision accelerated his execution date, marking him as one of the rare individuals eager to face their sentence. During his time in solitary confinement, Dodd's behavior remained unsettlingly calm. He spent his days writing in a journal and corresponding with legal representatives, offering little reflection or remorse for his actions. His journals, later released, revealed disturbing details about his crimes and hinted at his acceptance of his fate. On January 4, 1993, the final full day of his life, Dodd declined visits from spiritual advisors and made no public statements. He spent the day in silence, isolated in his cell, showing no signs of fear or regret. His only request was a simple last meal of salmon, potatoes, and vegetables. There were no dramatic outbursts or gestures, just a quiet resignation to the inevitable. Dodd's execution garnered significant attention, not only for his horrific crimes, but also for his choice of execution method, which was by hanging. By the 1990s, hanging was nearly obsolete in the United States, replaced by methods like lethal injection. Yet Dodd specifically requested it, claiming it was the only punishment fitting for the kind of crimes he had committed. This choice reignited debates about capital punishment, with some viewing it as a symbolic act of justice, while others deemed it an outdated and barbaric relic of the past. The morning of January 5, 1993, began quietly at the Washington State Penitentiary, yet the heavy anticipation surrounding Wesley Allan Dodd's fate hung over everyone present. Guards noted that his demeanor remained composed, his detached calmness mirroring the unsettling lack of remorse he had displayed since his sentencing. He declined a traditional breakfast, choosing instead to spend his final hours in silence. His only written note, later revealed, contained no apology to the families of his victims. Instead, it was a disturbing acknowledgement of his crimes, highlighting the lack of humanity that defined his actions. As the clock moved closer to midnight, the prison staff began the formal preparations for his execution. The gallows, a clear and rarely used apparatus, had been thoroughly inspected in the days prior to ensure it functioned without error. The noose, meticulously tied and measured to exact specifications, was designed to deliver a swift and effective hanging. Many staff members, unfamiliar with carrying out such a rare method of execution, found the process emotionally taxing. The knowledge that the event would forever remain imprinted in their memories weighed heavily on them. By 11:30 p.m., witnesses began gathering in the execution chamber. The room, small and lit with clear fluorescent lighting, felt claustrophobic as legal representatives, journalists, and selected members of the public took their seats. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the moment palpable. Outside the prison walls, crowds gathered, their emotions split between outrage and vindication. Protesters holding signs denouncing capital punishment stood alongside those demanding justice for Dodd's young victims. The divide reflected the broader societal debate that his case had reignited. At exactly 12:05 a.m., Dodd was escorted into the chamber by 2 guards. His measured footsteps echoed in the otherwise silent room, amplifying the unease felt by those present. He displayed no visible emotion, no fear, no regret, only the same disturbing detachment that had characterized his final years. When given the opportunity to make a final statement, Dodd declined. His silence added to the tension, leaving many witnesses unnerved. The execution proceeded with clinical precision. A black hood was placed over Dodd's head, obscuring his face from view. The noose was then secured around his neck, its knot positioned meticulously to ensure a quick and efficient death. The room remained eerily silent as the lever was pulled and the trapdoor beneath him opened. Witnesses watched as the method, though swift, served as a grim reminder of the severity of his crimes. Inside the chamber, emotions ran high. Some felt relief, believing that justice had been served. Others, particularly members of the victims' families, experienced a mix of closure and lingering grief. For the parents of Lee Isley, Dodd's youngest victim, the execution marked the end of a long and harrowing journey. They expressed a measured sense of relief, acknowledging that while Dodd's death could never undo the pain he caused, it symbolized a form of justice for their son. Outside, News of the execution spread quickly. Supporters of capital punishment viewed the event as a necessary consequence for one of the most heinous crimes in modern history. Protesters, however, decried the use of hanging, calling it barbaric and out of place in a modern justice system. The intense media coverage ensured that every moment of the night was scrutinized, cementing the execution of Wesley Allen Dodd as both a historical and moral landmark in the debate over the death penalty. The execution of Wesley Allen Dodd marked one of the last recorded hangings in the United States, cementing its place in the history of American capital punishment. For the families of his victims, it brought a measure of closure to years of unimaginable pain. However, the event also reignited debates about the ethics and effectiveness of the death penalty, particularly the use of hanging in the modern era. Beyond the immediate debates, Dodd's case left a lasting impact on child safety awareness. His crimes prompted communities, schools, and law enforcement to adopt stricter safety measures, ensuring children were better protected from predators. Though his death marked the end of a harrowing chapter, the ripples of his actions and the justice served continued to influence public policy and societal reflection for years to come.